This is Fitness Blender's Total Body Chair Workout. For this workout, you're going to need a chair and an optional dumbbell. We're going to be going through 2 rounds of 10 different exercises, and it'll take us around 32 minutes total. Let's go ahead and get started with the first round. Our first exercise is a seated toe touch stretch. Go ahead and get ready. And begin. Go ahead and scoot to the edge of that seat as far as is comfortable, kicking one leg out in front of you, the other leg underneath you for support. You're going to lean forward over that extended leg, trying to reach down to touch those toes. You want to keep that extended leg as straight as you possibly can. You don't need to actually get all the way down to those toes. You're just trying to stretch as far as is comfortable to get a little bit of stretch on that hamstring and into that lower back. Just keep it going for just a little bit longer. We're going to switch sides here in just a second. And go ahead and let it relax. We're going to switch those legs. Do the same thing on the opposite leg. To get a little extra stretch out of it, use those abdominal muscles and that hip flexor, the muscle through the front of that hip, to pull your upper body down over that leg a little bit more. Just get a little bit more stretch to that hamstring. We're almost done. Just a few more seconds. And let it relax. All right, moving on to the next one, the seated calf raise and chest press. Go ahead and get ready. And begin. Sitting out on the edge of that seat with those hands directly in front of that chest, those feet together nice and close right in front of those hips. You're going to press those hands together nice and tight, as hard as you can control, as hard as it's comfortable for you to do. Then nice and slow, press those hands directly out in front of you, extending those arms completely straight in front of those shoulders. Then nice and slow, bring it back, always pressing those hands in together. Along with that motion, every time you press out, you're going to come up onto those toes, contracting those calf muscles really nice and tight. You're not going to have a whole lot of weight there, but you want to get a nice tight contraction every single time, because even a little bit of a contraction is going to be enough to get a little bit more tone out of those legs, as well as a little bit more calorie burn. And go ahead and let it relax. We're going to move on to the next one. This is a high knee with a lateral raise. Go ahead and get ready. And begin. One leg at a time is going to come up really nice and high, pulling that knee as high as you can off the ground. Nice and slow, drop it back down, alternating to the other leg, just back and forth. And as you do so, you want to nice and slow raise those hands directly out to the sides, just about shoulder height. If you want to, you can use a dumbbell for this one to make it a little bit harder. Otherwise, just arm weight is perfectly fine to start out with. Now, as you do these repetitions, you're going to feel it in the front of that hip, right up nice and high, close to that hip joint, as well as the top of that thigh just a little bit. You're also going to really feel it in the top of those shoulders as you start getting further along in these repetitions, especially if you're using dumbbells. Now just keep that motion nice and slow under control, really focusing on trying to get a nice smooth motion, as well as working that range of motion as much as possible. So trying to get that knee up as high as you possibly can each time, and letting those arms come from right down next to your sides, all the way up to that shoulder height, trying to keep a nice straight line from side to side, making sure that those arms don't start traveling forward in front of your body. Almost done. This is your last one right here. And let it relax. All right, moving on to the next one, the seated leg extensions and overhead press. Go ahead and get ready. And begin. Sitting on the edge of that seat again, you're going to press those hands directly over top of your head at the same time as lifting one of those legs straight out in front of that hip. You want to try to keep that thigh parallel to the ground, the same time as getting a full extension on that leg, trying to straighten that leg as much as you possibly can every single time before letting that lower leg drop back down and placing that foot back on the ground and switching to the other side. Now, if you want to make this a little bit harder, you can always use ankle weights on those legs to make that thigh have to work much, much harder, or you can use dumbbells in those hands to make those shoulders have to work a lot harder. Just nice, slow, controlled motions. You're really going to start feeling this in the top of those shoulders again, just a little bit more towards the front than the last exercise, and you're really going to be feeling it a lot in the top of those thighs, much more than the last exercise. Now, one thing to be really aware of when doing this motion is that as those shoulders and as those legs start getting tired, your upper body is going to start trying to lean back. Try to keep that chest forward as far as you can, straight up and down, perpendicular to the ground. Make sure you don't start letting your body cheat by leaning back. Almost done, just one more in each leg. It's your last one right here with that shoulder press. And let it relax. All right, let's go ahead and move on to the next one, the seated side bends. Go ahead and get ready. And begin. We're going to start by focusing on that right side. So you're going to bring your right hand up behind your head and extend your left leg directly out in a straight line from your shoulders. So nice and slow, you're going to crunch down towards the right side, getting a nice tight squeeze in that right oblique from the base of that rib cage to the crest of that hip. Nice and slow, come back up straight and go ahead and tip all the way the opposite direction, letting the weight of that left arm actually pull you down a little bit. And then use those obliques to pull you back the opposite direction, crunching with that right side, getting a nice tight squeeze. Now, if you want to make this a little bit harder, you can always do this just holding a dumbbell in your hand. But the key to this is making sure that that arm stays directly out straight from your shoulder, that opposite arm. So that left arm's going to stay out straight, right arm's going to stay behind your head, and you're crunching to the right side. So just keep that motion going. Nice controlled motion. Nice tight squeeze every single time you come down to the right. This is our last repetition. Get a nice tight squeeze to the right side. Drop all the way back to the left. Straighten it back up and let it relax. All right, we're going to switch sides. We're going to do the same thing on the opposite side. So that left hand's behind that head this time, right arm extended. Go ahead and get ready. And begin. Left hand up behind your head, right arm straight out from those shoulders, crunching down to the left side, getting a nice tight squeeze in that left oblique this time. Remember, you want to feel it from the base of that rib cage to the crest of that hip. Nice tight squeeze every single time you come to the left. And then nice and slow, let it stretch back to the right side, stretching that left oblique out as you lean over to the right every single time, making sure you get as much range of motion out as possible before you slowly start crunching back over to that left side, getting that tight squeeze on that left oblique as you pull that elbow down to your side. Now remember, if you want this exercise to be just a little bit harder, you can always hold a dumbbell in that right hand. Just add a little extra weight to that oblique so that left side has to work just a little bit more. Just remember, the key is to keep that arm, that right arm, perfectly straight out from that shoulder as you tip back and forth. If you let it start to droop, then that weight changes and you're not going to have to work anywhere near as hard. And we're almost done. This is your last one off to that left side. Nice tight squeeze. Stretch it back to the right. Come back up straight and let it relax. All right, let's move to the next one. This is a seated Russian twist. You're going to sit sideways in your seat for this one. Go ahead and get ready. And begin. Keeping that back really nice and flat. You're going to lean back just a little bit, just as far as you can control without those feet coming off the ground. Then rotate left to right, rotating those shoulders as far as you can from left to right, trying not to let anything else move. You want those hands to stay directly in front of your chest. Don't let those hands swing back and forth. You want those shoulders completely stationary. All that motion just coming from your actual chest and shoulder area, rotating around that torso. Now, when you're ready to make this more difficult, there are two ways to make it more difficult. One is just leaning back further, and the other one is holding weight. So you're going to hold the weight just in front of your chest and rotate back and forth, keeping that directly centered in front of that chest. And there's your last one right here. And let it relax. All right, next one is a seated swimmer. Go ahead and get ready. And begin. Sitting straight on this one again. Nice and slow. Tip forward as far as you can, as far as is comfortable in that seat. Nice and slow. Bring those hands back up behind your back. Reach them around over top of your head, and then slowly let them drop back down next to those hips. Slowly bring it back up and over your body again, straight up off of those shoulders, and then back down again. Just keep that motion going, a nice, slow, fluid motion, kind of like a D shape with those arms. Just getting as much range of motion out of that shoulder every single time as you can, making sure that back stays perfectly flat. Almost done, just a couple more repetitions. And let it relax. All right, let's go ahead and go to the next one. This is the first one we're going to be doing standing. This is an assisted sumo squat. Go ahead and get ready. And begin. Spread those feet really nice and wide as it's comfortable. Kick those toes out so they're pointing just a little bit off, about a 45-degree angle off in each direction. Then nice and slow, start your squat. Drop it down really nice and slow, making sure you have a controlled motion both going down and coming back up. You want to try to get those hips as low as you can, as low as is comfortable for those knees and hips, while still trying to push that range of motion, trying to get as much out of those leg muscles as possible. Just one more repetition. Keep that motion nice and slow. And back up. And let it relax. All right, next one is assisted side leg lifts. Go ahead and get ready. And begin. Standing directly behind that chair, nice and slow, lifting your left leg off to the side as high as you possibly can, keeping that leg as straight as possible. Nice and slow, drop it back down, switch off to the other leg, lifting that opposite leg, that right leg up as high as you possibly can, again keeping it nice and straight, then slowly drop that one back down. Just keep alternating back and forth, keeping your upper body as straight up and down as you can, and getting that leg up and out to the side as high as possible without letting that torso kick over to the side. You want to try to keep that torso as straight up and down as possible. Good, almost done. Got one more on each side. Last one on that right leg. And let it relax. All right, moving to the last exercise, the assisted hamstring curls. Go ahead and get ready. And begin. Leaning forward just slightly with all your weight on that right leg. You're going to extend that left leg back behind you just a little bit, and then bending only at that knee. Pull that heel up towards your butt, getting a nice tight squeeze on that hamstring before slowly letting that leg extend back down, barely tapping that toe to the ground, and then lifting that leg right back up again. Now you're only going to get as much out of this as you put into it, so make sure that as you're doing this motion, you keep that motion really slow, and you make sure that you get a really tight squeeze at the top of that range of motion every single time. Now to make it a little bit harder, you can also try to work against yourself using that quadricep, the top of that thigh, to actually try to pull your leg back down while you're trying to use that hamstring to pull your leg up. Or you can also use something like an ankle weight to try to add just a little extra weight, make that hamstring have to work a little bit harder. Either way, you're trying to get as much out of this as you can, and you want to feel it primarily in the back of that thigh. Now this is your last repetition right here. Go ahead and let it relax back down, and then we're going to switch those legs. We're going to do the same thing on that opposite leg. Go ahead and start it up. Remember keeping that leg behind you just a little bit, getting a tight squeeze on that hamstring, pulling that leg up, using that thigh if you need to get a little extra work out of that hamstring, otherwise using something like an ankle weight. Just make sure you're keeping the motion nice and slow, getting as tight of a squeeze every single time as possible. You want that hamstring to be burning by the time you're finished. And here's your last repetition right here. Tight squeeze at the top. And let it relax. Alright, that was the end of round number 1. Go ahead and pause it here if you need to. Otherwise, we're going to start right back into round number 2. Let's start round number 2 back over with the seated toe touch stretch. Go ahead and get ready. And begin. Extending that right leg out, stretch down towards that toe as far as is comfortable. Trying to keep that right leg as straight as you can. Don't have to get all the way down to your toe, but just try to get as far as you can, making sure that hamstring is getting a good stretch and that lower back's getting a good stretch by rounding those shoulders forward down towards those hips. And go ahead and let that leg relax. We're going to switch over the opposite side to that left leg and do this motion again. Stretch out on that left leg, making sure it's staying nice and straight. Round those shoulders over forward, trying to get a nice stretch to that hamstring, the back of that thigh, and that lower back. Almost done. And let it relax. Alright, next one is a seated calf raise with chest press. Go ahead and get ready. And begin. That back nice and straight, those hands together in front of that chest. You're going to press those hands together as tight as you can, as tight as is comfortable. Then nice and slow, press those hands directly out in front of those shoulders, getting a full extension on those arms. Still pressing those hands together the entire time. Then nice and slow, bring them back in towards your chest before pressing those hands right back out again. Now as those hands go back out away from you, you want to push up onto those toes, contracting those calf muscles, trying to get those heels up off the ground as high as you can, getting a tight squeeze every single time as you press those hands out. Now as you bring those hands back in, those heels drop back down. Now by the end of this set, you want to feel those chest muscles really burning, and those calf muscles getting tired. It's your last one right here. Go ahead and let it relax. Let's move on to the next one, the high knee with the lateral raise. Go ahead and get ready. And begin. Lifting one leg off the ground, get that knee nice and high. You're going to bring those arms up from your sides to about shoulder height and slowly drop them back down as you drop that leg. And then alternate legs, switching over to the other side, lift that leg at the same time as lifting those arms back up again. Just keep that motion going nice and slow under control. Get a tight squeeze on that knee. Bring it up as high as possible every single time. You should be feeling this in the top of those shoulders as well as the front of that hip and top of that thigh. Just one more in each leg. And your last one right here. And let it relax. All right, moving on to the next one, the seated leg extension and overhead press. Go ahead and get ready. And begin. So starting with that back perfectly straight up and down, perpendicular to the ground, you're going to extend those arms directly over top of your shoulders, then nice and slow back down until that fist is just about shoulder height, then press them right back up. As you press them up, you want one of those legs to come up to a full extension so it's parallel to the ground, nice and slow letting that leg drop back down as those arms come back down, then alternate to the other leg. Do the same thing as you press those arms up again. Just make sure that as you extend that leg out, you're keeping that thigh perfectly parallel to the ground, never letting it droop or come up too high. You want to get a nice tight squeeze on that quadricep every single time. That top of that thigh should be really tired by the end of this, as well as those hip flexors in the front of that hip and the top of those shoulders. Good, just one more on each side. It's your last one right here. And let it relax. All right, next one is the seated side bends. Go ahead and get ready. And begin. That right arm comes up back behind that head. That left arm's going to be fully extended off of that shoulder. Make sure it stays straight off of that shoulder. You don't want it to droop or come up too high. Then nice and slow, crunch down towards that right side, tucking that elbow down towards that hip, getting a nice tight squeeze from the base of that rib cage to the crest of that hip. Then nice and slow, let that left arm kind of drop you back over to the left side, stretching that oblique back out. Then coming right back down on that right side, getting a nice tight crunch. There's your last one right here. Go ahead and let it drop back off to the left. Come back up straight and let it relax. All right, we're going to switch sides, do the same thing on the opposite side. Go ahead and get ready. And begin. Bring that left hand up behind that head this time. That right arm's going to be straight off of those shoulders. Nice and slow, tip off to the left side. Get a tight squeeze down on that left oblique. And then stretch it back to the right side, letting that left oblique stretch out before coming back down onto that left side, getting a nice tight squeeze. Now you want to only be feeling this on that left side, making sure that you're getting a tight squeeze every single time. But you want to feel it from the base of that rib cage to the crest of that hip, only on that left side. This is your last one right here. Tight squeeze to the left. Let it stretch back to the right. Come back up straight and let it relax. All right, next one is a seated Russian twist. Go ahead and turn off sideways on that seat. Go ahead and get ready. And begin. Remember, main thing to focus on in this one is keeping that back perfectly flat. You're going to lean back as far as you can control and then rotate those shoulders left and right as far as you possibly can, getting as much rotation on that torso as you can. Main thing you want to focus on is keeping those hands right in front of that chest and just pulling those shoulders side to side. Now you're going to be feeling this in those hip flexors and those quadriceps a little bit just for stability, but the main thing you want to be feeling is your abdominal muscles and those obliques again. Almost done. And let it relax. All right, let's go ahead and move on to the next one, the seated swimmers. Go ahead and get ready. And begin. Tip forward from those hips, keeping that back perfectly flat. Bring those arms in a nice big D motion down next to your legs, back to those hips, and then straight forward in line with your body up over top of your head, trying to push that range of motion as much as you can before letting those arms drop back down to your sides. Make a nice big swoop, half circle, before bringing those arms back up towards that head. Just make sure you're getting a nice range of motion through that shoulder as much as you possibly can, trying to pull those arms back behind your chest as much as possible every single time. Should be feeling this in the upper back, across those shoulder blades and upper shoulder. And go ahead and let it relax. We're going to move on to the next one, the assisted sumo squat. Go ahead and get ready. And begin. Feet nice and wide, toes turned out. Squat down nice and slow, getting those hips as low as you can control, as low as is comfortable. You're going to be feeling this in those butt muscles and in that thigh, that top of that thigh, as well as a little bit on the inside of that thigh. Now just make sure to get the most out of this that you're moving very slowly and you're trying to push that range of motion as far as is comfortable. You want to really try to get those hips nice and low. And there's your last repetition right here. Remember, keep it slow. And work your way back up. And let it relax. All right, moving to the next one, the assisted side leg lifts. Go ahead and get ready. And begin. Standing right behind that chair, you're going to lift one leg up off to the side, keeping that leg perfectly straight, getting as high as you possibly can without letting that torso kick off to the side. Then drop that leg back down and switch directly off onto that other leg, lifting that leg this time up as high as possible, keeping as straight as you can. Also be sure to keep that upper body perfectly straight up and down the entire time, trying to get that leg as high as possible without letting that upper body tip left or right. Now you want to be feeling this to the outside of that thigh mainly. You also might feel it a little bit into those obliques on that side that you're lifting. Almost done, just one more in each leg. Last one on the opposite leg. And let it relax. All right, moving on to that last exercise, the assisted hamstring curls. Go ahead and get ready. And begin. With all that weight on that right leg, you're going to extend that left leg back behind you so that toe's barely touching the ground, just a few inches behind the other foot. Slowly curl that leg up, only bending in that knee. Bring that heel up to that butt, getting a nice tight squeeze on that hamstring, the back of that thigh, before slowly letting that leg drop back down. Now you're primarily going to feel this in your hamstring, but you also might feel it a little bit in your butt muscle and your lower back, just from trying to hold that leg back there just a little bit. Now, if you want to make this a little bit harder, you can always use ankle weights, or you can always use that top of that thigh to actually work against yourself. So as you're trying to pull that heel up, you're actually trying to pull that leg back down using your quadricep, the top of that thigh. So just work against yourself as hard as you possibly can to get a little bit more calorie burn out of it. And there's your last repetition right here, tight squeeze. And let it relax. We're going to go ahead and switch sides, do the same thing on the other leg. Alright, with that right leg out back behind you just a little bit, all that weight support on that left leg this time. Curl that right leg up, bring that heel up to that butt as tight as possible, keeping that thigh behind you just a little bit. Tight squeeze every single time. Remember, a nice, slow, controlled motion. If you want to, add that thigh muscle, that quadricep in there to try to pull that leg back down to make that hamstring, the back of that leg, have to work a little bit harder. This is your last repetition right here. Nice and slow. Squeeze that heel up. Tight squeeze. Slowly back down. And let it relax. Alright, good job. You just finished this chair workout routine.